Hi again then guys, and welcome to what is probably kind of a shock to anyone who knows my taste in cars, because what on earth is this car doing in 25th place? It's my favourite car in the world. Well, clearly not, and this is down to an issue which I've found myself being in a number of times, to be honest, over the years. In the case of almost all of my favourite cars in the past as I grew up, but especially the three that I can remember, my favourite car back on Gran Turismo 2 used to be the Audi TT Quattro. Now that was when I was a kid. I didn't know nothing about nothing, so it's understandable at the time, but then later on, my favourite car for many years in fact was the Mercedes CLK GTR. But then I realised after a while that not only was Mercedes my favourite brand because of loyalty more than anything else, but the CLK GTR almost felt like a similar thing. I kept it as my favourite car, more so because I didn't want to change it than because it actually still was. So then later, I moved to having my favourite car as the Pagani Zonda F. And you guys know how much love and respect I still have for that car, and it will feature on this list. But then, I changed my favourite car again, after another couple of years to, of course, this car, the Cizeta V16T. I was introduced to this car thanks to Gran Turismo, as with quite a few on this list back in Gran Turismo 4, and I didn't fall in love with it back then because I didn't know enough about it to fall in love with it. And to me this is a car which I do still have a lot of love for. It is still on the list after all, but it's gone from being in my first place pick to now it's 25th. So why a drop? And why such a massive drop? Well, to be honest, the main reason why is because when I actually searched through why it was my favourite car, I found that it was essentially for the same reason as the Mercedes CLK GTR. But funnily enough, that reason doesn't apply to the Zonda F. I don't love the Zonda F just out of loyalty. I still believe it's a genuinely perfect car. With the Cizeta, I don't think it is. It was my favourite initially because it legitimately was, but then I just felt this loyalty to the car and didn't want to change it to something else. But when I was actually honest about it and really thought about it, the real reason why I love the Cizeta is purely because of the engine. And the truth of that can really be found when you compare this to its nearest natural rival, the Lamborghini Diablo. Now, for those who maybe don't know, the guy who designed this car designed the Lamborghini Diablo, because this is a Lamborghini Diablo. The Cizeta is actually more like the original Diablo concept design than the Lamborghini version is. They changed it, altered it, I would say watered it down a little bit compared to this, which I think is a far better looking car than a Diablo because of the more oddball, wacky details. But with that in mind, I don't have much interest in the Diablo at all. So this looking so similar to it makes me think, well, it's got to be something more than the looks. And I've always known that it was the engine that immediately caught my attention because it's still the only V16 engined production supercar ever made. It's not the only 16-cylinder, but it is the only V16, because of course the Veyron is a W. And I still adore the engine. It's a gorgeous engine. It has, I would say, one of the best sounds of any car ever built. You can look it up on YouTube. In fact, I, of course, included part of the sound in the start of the video. It sounds incredible to me, like some kind of mating between a big old-school V12 and kind of like an electronically controlled V8, almost, put together. It's got this low rumble, which has this just feeling of raw torque and power. It's a very fast car, and I do still have a huge amount of love for it. But as I said, when I really thought about it, the reason why it was my favourite was almost totally because of the engine and the sound. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love the rest of the car. I think it looks fantastic from the back, from the side. I think the headlights can divide opinion. Personally, I like the quad pop-up lights. The interior is a nice place to be. As with many of my other favourites, it's a car with a ton of presence. If you pull up in one, everyone notices it. Not that that's the be-all and end-all, of course, but it's pretty cool to have a car that you can feel that way in. Something which isn't just about showing off, but which people can actually enjoy looking at. Because if we're honest about it, if you pull up in something like a Ferrari, people have a certain opinion of you. It's a nice car, it's an expensive one, but they automatically don't like you. That's just the way it is. If you pull up in a Cizeta, well, they'll probably think it's a Lambo, But then when they see that the badge is different, that it says V16 on the back, it intrigues people, and they can learn from it. Kids can have dream cars fostered in that way. For me personally, in the past, I can attest to that being the case, seeing a car that captures your imagination and wanting to learn more about it. I still adore the V16T. It's just not a car which I think deserves to be in first place anymore. So the second question was, why has it dropped so much? Well, put simply, because once I was more honest about it, and actually considered why I love it, which, as I said, is due to the engine and the sound, which is technically just one thing, the engine, well, I can't have a favourite car based on just an engine. You could, but at the same time, for me, I can't. With that in mind, for a complete package, which is essentially what all of my absolute favourites have to be, which is basically the territory that we're in now, from 25 upward, but especially once you get up near the top 10, it has to be some incredible cars that I like literally everything about and that I pretty much wouldn't change anything about. Whereas for me with the Cizeta, I can't honestly say that I do love everything about it. I don't dislike any particular thing at all, but it's far from being my favourite of visual designs, and there are definitely other cars which I would buy instead of this, and that's always been the case. Even something like a Zonda F or an MC12 or a number of others I would definitely buy before getting a Cizeta, even if I had the cash. So by definition, it just can't be that high anymore. But I still have a huge amount of love for it. It's an incredible supercar, one of the rarest ever built, one of the fastest of the 90s, until of course stuff like the McLaren F1 came along, but still a very nice car, a very desirable one, and it does still deserve a place on my list for sure. Just not as high as it used to be. But that's it overall for this pick. If you are new to my countdown, you can check out all of the previous episodes by clicking through at the end. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.